Hello my friends, welcome back to Refit and Sail, and as you can see I'm sitting on a boat that looks very much like a Contessa 32 but is not. In fact, you probably can see the emblem up there. It has an S&S on the bow, and that's because this is the epitome of a classic plastic production yacht. This is an S&S34. The original design was from the late 60s. This one was built in the early 70s, and it is with me for some fairly extensive refit works. But before we get into the refit works that I've got to tackle on this boat, I will give you a quick look around and a little bit of history. This, my friends, is Moonraker, a 1971 S&S34, and like every boat that carries the Sparkman and Stevens name, she's a true classic. The S&S34 design first appeared in the mid-1960s, and it quickly became one of the most respected small ocean cruisers ever built. With her fine bow, long fin keel and graceful shear line, she's a yacht that looks just as good at anchor as she does charging across the ocean. These boats were built strong. Hand-laid fiberglass hulls, solid glass below the waterline, and a design that finds a sweet spot between performance and safety. You'll find them in every corner of the world, often still going strong after more than 50 years. The S&S34 earned its reputation the hard way, cruising and racing offshore. Sir Edward Heath famously raced Morning Cloud to victory in the Sydney to Hobart. John Sanders took his around the world multiple times, and Jesse Martin sailed his S&S34, Lionheart, solo and non-stop around the globe at just 18 years of age. It's the kind of boat that quietly proves what good design can really do. This S&S34 was built in 1971, and many moons have passed since then in the last 54 years. Generally speaking, she's wearing her years very, very well. You can see, having looked around the boat, where work has been done. She's had some really nice upgrades and modernisation in places, but unfortunately she does have a very, very damp and osmotic bottom. At first glance, it doesn't actually look that bad. There's only a few blisters on show, but the closer you look, the more you can see little dimples all over the place. And the owner has told me that over the last few years, every time the boat comes out of the water, he has ground out somewhere between 50 and 70 blisters every winter, dried them out, filled them full of epoxy, and filled and fed and kind of made it look nice again. But that really is just a sticking plaster, and this is his forever boat, so he wants to get it done properly. So that is the primary reason why this boat is with me today. There is possibly also going to be a hull repaint as part of this project, because it is looking pretty tatty. The owner's touched it up with some single pack paint in places. It is a 2-pack coating on the rest of it, so unfortunately that does mean the whole lot really needs to come off and get back to the original gel coat and start again. And as part of that, it may also get some tow rails, but that is not the subject of these first 3 videos. What I want to do in this video and the following 2 is cover off as much as I can, in as much detail as I can, the process I go through to do an osmosis treatment on a boat. This isn't my first osmosis treatment, as you can probably imagine, and it certainly isn't the first one that has been on this channel. So on Refit and Sail, I did a big refit on a Contessa 32 called Lottie, and as part of that, I also did an osmosis treatment. So if you're interested in the subject and you want to have a look at the back at those videos, they were a while ago, so you know, things have improved in terms of hopefully my presentation, and I'm going to try and cover off a full osmosis treatment once again. And of course, a train is going past because I'm recording on the video, so hopefully you can hear, because I'm not starting and stopping again. I have done it many times. Well, I've just unlocked. Let's go and have a little look down below. Well, first impressions down below, and it doesn't smell musty. It doesn't have that old boat smell. I've come in here, it is kind of the tail end of summer, but it smells dry, it smells clean, which is always nice when you get on any boat, particularly a boat that's been around for more than 50 years. And the owner's obviously got lots of stuff, bits and pieces out all over the place, but let's ignore that, because some of that needs to go away. Some of it needs to go to my workshop before we start working on the boat, and just have a quick look around the interior. Without my face in the way, we are in the main saloon. That is looking forward, so if we sweep round on the port side, we have a kind of settee area there. The cushions aren't currently on it. Some really lovely woodwork. There's those big windows so you can see out and have a clear view of wherever you are. Now down there, I believe there used to be a sea berth or quarter berth behind the chart table. and it's obviously had a bit of an electronics upgrade, so there's some nice Blue Sea Systems switchgear there. The galley is around on the other side, and we have a good sea galley right here. Gas cooker. There is a fridge, I believe, on both sides of the boat. One's a fridge and one's a freezer that you can turn down to become a fridge. Storage behind. There are all the cushions kind of stacked up waiting for me to take them off the boat. Again, lovely woodwork, lots of lockers. And then moving forward, we have a big double V-berth up at the front with some very thick, comfy cushions. By the looks of it, I'm sure this is the owner's cabin. Plenty of space there to stretch out. On the port side, through this door, we have the heads. So there's a door that closes it off from the forward cabin. There is the heads in there, typical boat heads. And there is also a privacy door right here, so you can close two doors and have a completely private separate heads from the rest of the boat. In terms of berths, I would imagine this would sleep four reasonably comfortably. So you've got two up the front, and then you've got a sea berth there you could have with a lee cloth, and I imagine that one on the port side also converts to a berth, so you can sleep four. I think, like the Contessa 32, it's a great boat for two people. You can sleep and cruise with four. It's a bit of a squeeze. Beyond that, you start treading on other people's toes, particularly compared to sort of more modern boats. But these are a very, very seaworthy, safe design, and I imagine most people sailing them, just like sailing Contessas, to be honest with you, are doing it as a couple, or possibly as a couple with occasional friends. Now, because this was a racing boat of its day, they did obviously want to do as much as they could to have as good a performance as possible. And one of the things they did was mount the engine right in the centre of the boat. In here is a fairly new Beta Marine. I think it's a Beta 25. That is driving a folding propeller that actually comes out the back edge of the keel right up high. So the weight is right in the centre of the boat, which is great. The downside of that is you probably get a little bit less prop wash if you want to have the rudder halved over and give a good thrust of a head or a stern. You're not going to get quite the same effect. So there's pros and cons to all of these sort of things. The owner has done a lovely job of the refitting work that he has done. He's done some of this woodwork, he's done all of the painting, and it really is a nice tidy example of an S&S34, which is why he wants to continue to invest in it and get the other problems that he has with the boat resolved, so that his forever boat can keep going for many, many years to come. In case you're wondering, I am 6'1" and I can just about stand up at the back end of this main saloon. My hat is kind of brushing the roof. Obviously this is the highest bit. If you saw the coach roof profile, it does kind of come down and get lower. I'm going to say at this point there is slightly more headroom than you would have on a Contessa 32, but just like a Contessa, as you go forward it diminishes. So if you're tall, you're going to be doing a little bit like this, but you know, that's the price of having a beautiful classic boat. Sometimes you do always have to have a bit of a compromise. This certainly isn't a modern production bendy toy. Before we actually get into the works, let's have a quick talk about the process that I'm going to go through with the bottom of this boat. So step one is to remove all of the seacocks. I know some people do osmosis treatments without removing the seacocks, but because of the process that I do, I feel it gives the best result. So I'm going to remove all of the seacocks. Step two is then to peel all the surface of the underwater hull. So this boat has an anti-fouling coating all over it, and normally, and especially if that is a fairly rough surface, I'll get the boat media blasted first to remove all the anti-fouling, and then I will peel it. However, on this particular boat, the anti-fouling is in such good, flat, nice condition, I'm going to get my peeler out and I'm going to peel straight through the anti-fouling and into the anti-osmotic barrier that is there and into the laminates all in one go, to save both time and cost to the owner. As I said, normally wouldn't be able to do that, because if there is a lot of anti-fouling on the bottom of a boat and it is of a variable thickness, the risk is you end up removing more or less actual hull laminate depending on how thick the anti-fouling is. But I'm pretty confident with this boat that I can peel it straight through the anti-fouling. Once that has done, I will commence the washing process. So I would normally wash a hull like this multiple times, but I will also get it media blasted at that stage as well. So I would normally potentially have to do 2 media blasts, but on this boat I'm only going to do the one once it is peeled. So that second media blast, or in this case first media blast, is going to open up the hull surface. It's going to open up any blisters that are kind of hidden there that aren't immediately obvious. Normally the blisters are relatively close to the surface. Quite often they're between the gel coat and the laminate. Sometimes they are just in the laminate a little bit, and so we're going to be peeling and then opening up all those blisters with a media blast. Then there'll be lots of washing, so you can do all the washing with a standard cold water pressure washer. If you have access to a hot pressure washer or a steam cleaner, that can help flush out all of the material that we're trying to get out of the laminate. So when we are drying a hull, we are not just drying it in terms of removing the seawater, the moisture content out of the hull. We're also trying to remove the chemical compounds that are in the laminate, which are sucking the water in. So when these boats were built, they were laid up with resin that had hydroscopic components within the resin as to act as water scavengers, to pull water and moisture out of the mix and stop it from affecting the cure of the resin. Now, unfortunately, those hydroscopic elements still work when the boat has been laid up and put in the water and suck in moisture into the laminate. And what we want to do is try and flush out as much of those contaminants as we can from the laminate that we can get to. So once I have done lots and lots and lots of washing over multiple days, I will then move this boat indoors. I'm going to take the rig down, move it into the shed, and I'm going to apply my heat and vacuum pads to it so I can heat and vac sections of the boat, starting at the bow maybe and working aft, and that will get set up running at an appropriate temperature for the glass fiber hull so that it heats up the laminate and force dries the laminate under a vacuum. And what the vacuum does is it reduces the boiling point of all the nasties that we're trying to suck out and get rid of from the laminate. And normally stick the pads on for somewhere between 8 and 12 hours per section. I have to monitor it whilst it's heating and just make sure there aren't any issues. I have to be particularly careful if there's any insulation, for example, on the inside of the boat, because that can cause problems and cause the laminate to overheat. So you do have to do it with extreme care to make sure you don't overheat the glass fiber laminate. But as long as it's kept under sort of 18-90 degrees, generally speaking, you don't have any issues whatsoever. If you're worried, you can set it to a lower temperature and run it for longer, but obviously we also need to get the boat done in a reasonable length of time. Once it is dried, it will be washing time again, because it will have drawn lots of impurities to the surface which we need to get rid of before we can start rebuilding the surface. Now, after we've done that, next step is going to be to refinish the surface, and I will start off by laying up a layer of biaxial glass, possibly 2 layers depending on how much material I remove. That will be laid up with an epoxy resin. On top of that, we then need to start doing filling and fairing, because we need to get the hull shape back to chef kiss perfect shape. So that is where the hard work really begins, because filling and fairing with a longboard, lots of epoxy fillers, that takes a lot of time, lots of muscles, lots of sweat, blood and tears to get it absolutely right. And I'm probably fussier than most people when it comes to refinishing a hull, because to me the underwater hull shape has to be perfect if you want to go sailing in a boat. Even on a cruising boat, I want it to be perfect. My cruising boat, I sand it every year before applying fresh anti-foul, because I like to have a nice fair bottom. There's no point in going slowly if you can go a little bit faster, and that's the mantra that I take with me into the work that I do for my clients as well. So lots of filling and fairing. Finally, once that's done and I'm happy with it, I will then put on the bottom a fresh epoxy barrier coat, and then I think the owner wants copper coat on this as the final stage, as his anti-fouling product of choice, but I could put anything on top of that anti-osmosis barrier. So that is the process in a nutshell. I probably will go into it with more detail as I go through this project. As I said, the plan is to do this over 3 sections, but the third section, which is the filling and fairing, is going to take a long time. I will obviously be showing the work being done, but I'm not going to show you hours and hours and hours of sanding because there is only so much internet and I don't want to waste it. One thing I'm also going to do is remove a very ugly non-standard stainless steel skeg cap that's been put on this. The original skeg cap was lost by someone else that was working on this boat, and they made something out of stainless steel which the owner isn't particularly happy with, and I can kind of understand why because it's pretty nasty. I'm going to see if I can make up or purchase a alternative skeg cap to go on there. It's very similar to a Contessa arrangement, so I might even be able to use a Contessa 32 skeg cap on there, but that will get removed. I think for the peeling I might leave the rudder on and peel the rudder in place. I haven't completely decided, but as I said, step one, let's get these seacocks out. There's a mixture in here. Some are very nice bronze seacocks, which we may reuse. Some are run-of-the-mill through holes of unknown providence, shall we say, so they will probably get cut out and put in the bin. And when this is all put back together in a few months' time, it will have all nice new high quality seacocks fitted. So again, it will be a problem that the owner doesn't have to worry about for many years to come. Fortunately, there are only 6 seacocks on this boat to remove. There's 2 for the cockpit drains, there's this one here for the sink, and then forward there is 1 for the engine, 2 for the heads, and that is it. So this is not going to take particularly long. Seacocks like this, which are going to go in the bin, I'm just going to cut off or grind off the top of this. I might cut sections into it and then break off those sections and push it into the hull. That's an easy way of doing it. Another way of doing it is with a hole saw, and you can hole saw up. If you get exactly the right hole saw size, you can cut into the flange and again push the seacock up into it. Or the third option is to grind off the head, but you do have to be very careful about heat if you're doing it that way, so you don't transmit too much heat into the laminate. So my favoured way to do it is in fact to cut sections out of this with an oscillating saw, which I will do shortly, and then just break those sections off. If I nick the surface on this particular boat with the oscillating saw, it really doesn't matter because we're going to be peeling the hull anyway, so I can do it without having to be overly careful. Obviously I don't want to cause damage that would otherwise need to be repaired, but in this case super easy. Buzz buzz, break off the things, push it in, job done. The other thing I'm going to be removing is this fella here, which is the log, and we've got a depth transducer just there. So the plan actually is to glass up the hole for this fella here, and we're going to put in a single central line transducer here, which is a job I've done on many Contessa 32s, so that he has one less hole in the hull, and that is one less worry to think about. Well, they say that misery loves company, and occasionally there are jobs on boats that really make me rethink my life choices, but it's only occasionally. Let me show you a couple of things which are interesting and challenging all at the same time. First of all, I did mention the engine earlier. That is the engine. I've taken the top off it because I was trying to find the engine inlet seacock, and that is hidden all the way down there and virtually impossible to get to, which is why I cut the outside off. Some seacocks are easy to get to and easy to remove. In fact, the one in the heads behind me, I just unscrewed from the inside because I gave it a twist and it was like, that's kind of loose, so we'll just unscrew that and take that out. Very easy. Took 10 minutes, maybe 15, with finding a hot air gun to take the hose off. The one that's down under the engine, well, I wasn't going to get to it on the inside, so I chopped it off on the outside, as you just saw. But I'm now doing the heads, and they are challenging to get to. We do love old boats. Right, so I'm going to take you forward to where I'm currently working, and the head seacocks are under there, which obviously doesn't give a huge amount of access. That was the inlet seacock right there. That actually came out pretty easily. I'm fairly confident that has been out before because the nuts were in reasonable condition. The head's outlet is that fella there, so not exactly easy to get to. I've managed to loosen off the hose, but I can't currently get the hose off the seacock. Now, having removed 3 out of the 4 nuts, I am at least pleased I have done it, because they have kind of reached the end of their life. That is what is left of the 3 nuts I've removed. The one that is in one piece isn't actually in one piece. You can see there are 2 cracks in it. I don't know if it will focus, and you can see that. The other ones have sort of disintegrated, and you see they're kind of pink. So those brass or bronze nuts are absolutely at the end of their life, and at the moment I'm trying to reach the last one, which is kind of out of view and almost impossible to get to. So if you are under any illusion whatsoever that my job is glamorous in any way, trust me, jobs like this are the opposite of glamorous. I'm dealing with dirty, shitty old seacocks, which are impossible to get to and haven't moved, or at least this one hasn't moved in 54 years. Hence the nuts falling apart. So I'm going to carry on fighting the good fight. I can't get a camera in here to show you what I'm doing whilst I'm doing it. There is swearing. I have already donated some blood to this boat, but I'm just going to have to push on. 3 out of 4 ain't bad. I've just got to get this last nut off and then persuade the seacock off of the hull. Hopefully it won't give up too much more of a fight. In the end, I decided to drop the rudder before peeling the boat. It was just going to make the job slightly easier, and as you can see, I'm using my magic rope trick to hold the rudder in place whilst I removed all the fixings in the cockpit and the heel plate below deck, and I can just lower it down. The rudder weighs, I'm going to say, 25 to 30 kilos, so not too heavy, certainly manageable on my own. Whilst you're watching me do this, do remember, if you like my content, please do hit the subscribe button. It helps massively grow the channel, and you can also give me a thumbs up down below. If you can do those 2 things, I would really, really, really appreciate it. Well folks, the time has come. All the seacocks are out and I want to get this boat peeled today. In fact, the camera is being held by my able assistant Toby, who's going to be helping me get this peeled today. But before I did that, I wanted to get my moisture meter on it. And there's a train going by, so I apologise for the background noise, but I'm not going to start again. I wanted to get some baseline numbers using the moisture meter. So I've been all over the hull and it's wet. It's very, very wet. So it's between very, very wet and off the scale, in fact, on my Tramex. But the other thing that I have been wanting to do is work out where it is wet and where it is dry in terms of where I want to peel, because obviously the water line is somewhere here. You can see where the water normally sits, about there. And I wanted to pop the moisture meter on and see where it goes from very wet and alarming to not so wet and in the green. And obviously if we go right up onto the top sides here, which haven't been in the water, they are nice and dry, well into the green. They're giving me numbers of under 10% on the comparative scale and well into the green, whereas down here very, very wet indeed. So I've been round with a marker pen and just sort of dotted on the top here roughly where it gets wet and where I want to peel from, so I've got a line to work to. When it comes to the keel is solid lead. It's a bolt-on keel, so to make it really obvious, I'm going to put a piece of tape on that line where we go from hull, which needs to be peeled, to keel, to make sure that I stop and don't try and peel the lead, because my peeling machine, which I'll show you in a minute, will remove the lead from the keel if I let it. It's a vicious machine. It will remove anything that is in front of it, whether it's GRP, heads of bolts, my skin, or whatever. So you need a fair amount of care to, 1, not hurt yourself, but also 2, not remove bits of boat, which it will do alarmingly fast if you're not really careful. So let's get the peeling machine out and I'll show you how that's all going to work. I've just got all my tools out, and this is the beastie that I'm going to be using. This is from the States, actually. I bought this in the US. It is from a company called Gel Peel. They don't sell them, another company sells them, but they're made by Gel Peel. There are different machines that you can buy for peeling gel coat for this sort of work. There is a company in the UK which also sells something very, very similar. These are expensive machines. It was slightly cheaper, at least 3 or 4 years ago when I bought this, probably more than that now, to buy it in the States, and it possibly still is now. It has a rotating drum on the top here, and you can see it has these sharp carbide blades. Now they're square, which means you can unscrew these fixings, pop them up, turn them around 90 degrees and put them back in. So you've got 4 cutting surfaces on each of these blades, and they're numbered just to make it nice and easy. So these are all brand new blades that I have put in, and what you can see there is the detritus and debris that kind of comes out of holes when you peel them and it sticks on. Essentially it's that way round when I use it, and all the stuff ends up getting collected in this plastic housing here, and I connect up a vacuum to this here. Now this thing removes a lot of material very, very quickly, so we're going to be filling up many bags full of old boat today. Moving on from the peeler, obviously we need to collect all the dust that's going to come out of it, and we have a hose on the floor which we can follow all the way up to this thing here, which is the collector, as I call it. It's actually a thing called a dust commander. It has a cyclone device on the top of it, a bit like a Dyson vacuum cleaner as it was, or I think lots of other companies do something similar, and all the dirt, dust, shavings, what have you, anti-fouling, are all going to get collected in that drum at the bottom there, and we'll collect it up and put that in some bin bags and dispose of it responsibly. For that to work, it obviously needs to be connected up to a source of vacuum, and I use my standard kind of shop vac. I've got lots and lots of these. They're cheap and nasty, and they last about a year because polyester dust loves killing the motors. But that is the setup for collecting as much of the muck as we can, because we don't really want it floating around in the atmosphere. But we will be wearing some PPE, so I'm going to be fully masked up, covered up in a coverall, protective glasses, and importantly, I'm going to need some ear protection as well, because this beastie here is very, very noisy. Have progressed, as you can see. I just thought I'd stop for 2 things. My muscles are slightly aching because it's physically quite hard work holding quite a heavy machine at the right angle and moving it at the right speed, and not having kind of big gaps between the peels that I'm doing. You can see these kind of little wispy bits. That's where I haven't quite overlapped, but these things come off really easily. You just take a scraper to it and they just come straight off, which is actually what Toby's doing behind me, as well as moving the collection bucket. But I just thought I'd point out a couple of interesting things as we go. So these little white bits here, and there's some more kind of down here. There isn't too many on this bit of hull. I think there's going to be more as I work backwards there, where the owner or previous owners have just ground out little blisters and done a little fill, I think. There is the odd bit where you can see the moisture has gotten into the laminate and was starting to form blisters actually within the glass laminate. I'm going to say that is one there. It's just because you can see it's a little bit more white, and that is probably the start of a pocket of a blister in the hull laminate, and there are a few sort of dotted around that I can see where you can see the osmotic pressure was starting to build up in little pockets and actually damage the laminate. So I'm going to say this has been caught at probably the right time before it got too much worse, because it is, as you may have seen in an earlier video when I did exactly this job on Project Lottie, that was really quite bad, and there were lots of pockets of blisters in the laminate that were literally just pulling the whole laminate apart. So for those of you that have heard the old saying that osmosis has never sunk a boat, I can assure you it most definitely has caused significant structural damage to a boat to the point where it has to be scrapped. No, it may not have sunk on its mooring, but it will sink the value and sink the purpose of having that boat by damaging it to the point where the whole laminate is no longer usable if you leave it long enough. I have discovered this little patch of loose laminate here as I was grinding, so I don't know quite what's happened there. I don't know if that's a large blister or whatever, but that is going to need to be pulled off. I don't obviously know what caused that damage. Maybe it was in there from the layup of the boat. I think that's unlikely. Hard to say what's actually caused that. Poor shoring, who knows, but I'm going to have to pick that little bit of loose laminate off at some point and see how deep it is. Maybe it'll need a repair, maybe it can just get filled as part of all the other work that we're going to be doing. We'll see. But my arms have probably had enough of a rest now, but I'm going to carry on, do another metre or so, and then it's going to be morning coffee time. I'm going to see if I can find a cake for the man holding the camera, because he's just told me it's his 27th birthday today. Happy birthday, Toby. What I forgot to say just a second ago, now I'm standing on the ground, I want to show you this here and this kind of like stepped effect. And there is a reason why I've got that, is when you're using the peeler, it has two guides on each side of the rotating head, and you need to have one of those guides on the unpeeled hole and the other guide on the peeled hole, and the blade is angled slightly so that when you're running down it you end up with a flat surface. And of course if I came down and I just stopped in a straight line, I would struggle to get the guide that needs to be on an unpeeled surface onto an unpeeled surface. And so what I can do now is I can come down and carry on that stripe down there by putting the right hand guide on that bit of laminate and buzz down, and then I can do the next stripe, buzz down, and the next stripe, buzz down, and do it like that. The one thing you also need to be super careful of course, is your guide, if it hits a hole like that where there was a seacock, is going to disappear into the hole. And it's really, really easy. Guess how I know? It's really, really easy to remove a lot of laminate by accident, because your guides drop down a hole and you suddenly go bzzz, and go, oh shit. Well, you just have to be aware of where they are and sort of just like hover over it just for a fraction of a second as you go, not kind of push into the hole too hard. I've got a feeling we might be moving this seacock here. This is the engine inlet seacock, and it is an absolute pain to get to, so we might be moving it up to there, so that hole might end up getting glassed up anyway as part of the project. But my arms have recovered now, so we better get on, do a bit more peeling, and then it's going to be morning coffee time. Well folks, it's now the end of the day and I am aching in many places that I wasn't previously aching in, because I've been using muscles that haven't been used for a while. But you can see behind me the port side is all done. It turned out pretty much as I expected. The hull on this isn't too bad. Found a few nice squishy nasty blisters in the hull that were uncovered and were oozing some horrible stinky fluid, but that's fairly normal. As always, there's a little bit of what I call boat archaeology that I do as I uncover all the sins of the past. Without my face in the way, there is the hull. And there are a few things that I might point out. So up there's obviously an old skin fitting that's been removed. Some of the laminate is not looking brilliant, so we might just have a little investigative dig around in there. You can see there are lots and lots of blisters that the owner or previous owners have ground out and filled. The main thing that caught me out was under here, which needs a bit more investigating. There is an old skin fitting, and that basically ruined a set of blades on my peeling machine, which is not ideal. There's one of these horrible stinky kind of blisters. It's dried up now, but earlier when I was pushing on that, it was just leaking fluid, and you can see the evidence of fluid kind of oozing out of the laminate in various places all over here. So that actually feels a little bit soft there, so that's sort of an example of a blister that needs opening up a bit further, and when the boat is media blasted, that's exactly what will happen. There are odd pockets on this boat. There's one there where the laminate just kind of fell out, and there's another one here. There's been 3 or 4 of these bits of kind of laminate which are just detached, little circular bits, so I don't know if they are old repairs and the laminate hasn't stuck. But this is apparently the worst bit of the boat, this port quarter, and you can see there are kind of patches where there are blisters that need opening up here and there. Quite a few little repairs. I probably, to be fair, peeled off most of the little fills that the previous owner and the current owner maybe have done to the hull, but yeah, that's it. I'm going to go and have a cup of tea. I'm going to leave this alone now. Tomorrow I'm going to be peeling the other side, and then it's largely done in terms of the bulk. At that point I'll put in some temporary shores, or I'll get the yard to put in some temporary shores around the cradle pads, and then I can do under all of the pads. It's now the next day, and as you can see, starboard side is now all peeled. It was pretty much a rinse and repeat of yesterday. It went a bit quicker, if anything, and yeah, basically it's all done on this side. I've also had the front cradle pads out. Some temporary supports were put in so that I could peel behind those cradle pads. They've gone back in, and we've got the temporary supports now in at the back of the boat. If I can just angle it correctly, you can see, hopefully, there. Got a temporary support in, and the cradle pad is backed off the boat. The guys in the yard just did that before going home. So first thing tomorrow, I can peel the little square of anti-fouling that is kind of just up there, and then all the peeling is done. But what I can't do is obviously peel in tight corners. So if I bring you back down again, so you can see all around here where the prop shaft comes out, it's just all a bit too tight in there for me to get the peeler in there. So what I do there is I go in with my Makita belt sander, which I'll show you in a minute. But if we go around to the other side, I did a little bit of sanding today. Sorry, train going by. That's real life in the boatyard for you. If we look at this side, you can see I've been in with a belt sander and cleaned up all that surface, got all the anti-fouling off it, got the old osmotic barrier coating off it, and we're down to the laminate. There's a fair amount of filler in there. One thing that was interesting on the starboard side, and when I say it was a rinse and repeat of yesterday, it really was, right down to the hidden skin fitting here. This is exactly the same place as there was one on the other side, and of course the blades got into that and I shattered one of the blades on my peeler, chipped another one, so I ended up having to take the thing apart and move blades around and what have you to make it work properly again. But you know, that's just the way it goes. Sometimes you find unexpected things when you start unpeeling the onion of an old boat. So without my facing away, you can see I've got a fair amount of just fiddly stuff to do down the bow here. I possibly could have done a bit more with the peeler there, maybe, I don't know. It was tricky, but it won't take long to do it with the belt sander. So I've got to do basically all the centre of the boat, top of the keel down to as far as the lead around there, where the prop comes out, all the way around. The skeg here needs doing, and on this side I've already done the top of the keel actually. So if I get in close, you can see there's the lead there, which I've just touched with the grinder, and that is all kind of ready for drying. Of course, the other thing I've got to do is the rudder, which is down here. Now actually It's pretty dry, this rudder. I'm used to rudders which drip when you take boats out of the water, but this one hasn't, and it's not blistered. Normally, the most osmotic part of any boat is normally the rudder, because water gets inside, and water's obviously on the outside, and they tend to suffer osmotic blistering far more quickly than the hull of a boat. And in fact, there's an example of it over here. So there's a Contessa I've been working on. It's just been painted, but I don't know if you can see it, but there is the odd blister in this rudder here. I don't know if that's going to be visible, but if you look at it at the right angle, you can just see there's a few blisters in that rudder. I don't think there's actually anything wrong with this other than it's got a few blisters, I imagine. But normally, if you're going to see blistering on a boat, you're going to see it in the rudder before you see it in the hull. But as I said, this S&S is a little bit unusual in that the hull has been blistered, but the rudder actually seems to be pretty okay. Well folks, the sun is finally shining. The weather has been absolutely atrocious here this week, but I need to get all the fiddly bits done on this boat so that it can get its media blast next week. It's Friday today, and I'm hoping the guy's going to come Monday or Tuesday to open up all the remaining blisters and loose laminate on the hull. Now I'm going to be doing that. I mentioned it to you before. I'm going to be doing all that sanding and final prep with my little Makita belt sander. This thing is the 9031, and I'll put a link in the description actually, because this thing is absolutely magic. I bought this some time ago, having seen a few other people recommend them, and you just can't go wrong. I've had multiple small belt sanders, but I've never replaced this one. It just keeps going. It's got a nice wide belt on it. It is so useful for so many different jobs. You can get your vacuum cleaner up close to it, which is what I'm going to be doing all these fiddly bits to try and suck as much of that dust as possible. Do yourself a favour, get one of these, and in about 10 years time, after you have bought it and used it and put hundreds of hours on it, you can thank me. Right, before I get onto that, I just thought I'll talk a little bit more about some boat archaeology stuff, because I found something else interesting when I was peeling this boat. In fact, I found it interesting when I was going around with my moisture meter. There was an area of the hull which was considerably drier, virtually actually coming up as a dry hull compared to the rest of the boat, which was very, very wet. And it was just here on the starboard side, and I thought, something going on there. Maybe there's an old repair, maybe there's something else going on there. I wasn't quite sure. So I did the peel, obviously, and I don't know if you can tell, but there is a slight difference in the colour of the laminate here. I'm just tracing the outline with my finger. You may or may not be able to see that on camera, but there has been a repair in this area, and based on the smell, I'm going to say that this was done with epoxy, whereas the rest of the hull is polyester. Now, epoxy is well known to be a much more waterproof, more water resistant material as opposed to polyester, which is why we put epoxy barrier coats on boats. But it also proves the point as to why I go through the process of laying up a layer of glass over the entire hull, or sometimes 2 layers of glass over the entire hull after doing the drying of a hull, because you're putting an epoxy barrier on in the form of epoxy and glass before you then fill and fare, and before you then put the actual barrier coat on the top. So that is kind of why I do it, because guess what? This area here is pretty dry. This area here, off the scale wet. So it definitely works, and it's always interesting to kind of see the results of what you're actually trying to do in the real world actually working. So very interesting. Hello my friends, it has been a few weeks since I have done any recording on this episode and some things have changed, as you can probably see. The boat is largely probably as you remember it, but the surroundings have very much changed. We are now in my workshop, so we have some space here, behind the boat over here we have my clean rooms, and we obviously have an S&S34. What has happened over the last few weeks? Well, we have done lots and lots and lots of washing of the laminate. So initially we were washing it every single day, and then as time went on it was getting washed every second day or every third day, and it got a final wash yesterday, and then this morning it went on a truck on a low loader, brought around to my workshop, dropped into my wheel cradle, and we've just brought it inside so that we can start the proper drying of the hull. What else has happened in that time? Well, we have glassed up the holes that we don't want. You may recall there was a hole there for an old log transducer, so that has been glassed up. There were various other bits on the boat that needed attention before we do the drying. If you recall, I had some fittings each side that managed to appear and smash up a set of peeler blades, so that has been ground back and that has been glassed. There was a funny little thing we found there. It was like a filled hole, but it hadn't been filled very well, so that got glassed up, so it's all a veneers. On the other side, you may remember that there was an old repair kind of up here. Hopefully you can see it, and didn't really like the look of it, to be honest with you. Some of the laminate was just starting to pull away, so we ground that back to find something really solid, and then that has been re-glassed. And of course there was another fitting on this side that's been ground back and glassed up because there was that hidden mystery fitting on both sides. And we've also glassed up a hole there, which was the engine intake, the water intake just there, because we're relocating it to a slightly better place on the boat. So that has all happened. And the next stage is to get it properly dry using my heat and vacuum pads, which will be the subject of the next episode. So stay tuned for that. I'm going to bring this episode to a close because we've got the boat to a stage where it is ready to be dried. Thank you very, very much for watching. Thank you also to those of you that support the show. There's a PayPal link down in the description where you can buy me a beer or two or three. To those of you that do that, thank you. If you don't want to do that, that's absolutely fine, but one thing you can do, which costs absolutely nothing, is give me a thumbs up down below. It really does help grow the channel, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe, because again, it really helps me grow the channel. Thanks for watching. Hope that's been fun. Stay tuned for the next episode where we start getting this properly dried out, and then we will move on to getting it all re-laminated, filled and faired, and making the bottom beautiful again. See you soon. Bye for now.